With so many players projected to go past 100 points this year, picking them up at the right time could be the difference between breaking away from the pack and trying to catch up. So today, I'll be going over all the players I think will get 100 for a season average this year and let you know which players I think you should start, which ones might be better to pick up throughout the season, and who you should probably just keep on the watch list just in case. My name's Woody, this is Wooden Spoon Data, and to get some outside perspective and help broaden our horizons, I'm joined by DR and Janath from Supercoach Swordplay. How are you doing today, lads?
Very well, mate. Very well. Apologies, I did miss out on the last collaboration, our home video, Janath, as you referred to it, mate. Very disappointed. But as I did say pre-podcast, if you wanted two people that video, you want the two most intelligent people that are sitting right up the top at the moment. But great to have you on, mate. We're a huge fan of your initial video that you put out. We said, look, we need to get this great man on, do a collab or two. And wrap to be here today. Janath, how about yourself, brother?
Yeah, doing well, mate. Busy week so far, but again, pleasure to be on your channel, Woody. Thank you for joining us in our home territory. We're on your home territory now. We're very keen to see what you crack into tonight.
Cheers, guys, and I'm keen to see what you guys think. Now, before we start, remember these numbers are just meant to give you an idea about what might happen. Your depth of knowledge and discernment might mean you think differently. Personally, I haven't really followed these numbers exactly, nor do I suggest you do this, but I have found them as a useful launching point, and hopefully you do too. So let's get into this. So, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera claims my number one spot as the projected best defender in 2026. After a stellar 2025 where he averaged 115 points, my overall prediction suggests he will see a modest rise to 116.76. However, the real excitement lies in his linear projections. When averaged, they suggest a ceiling as high as 137.75. So, look, I don't think many people would suggest he'll actually achieve that, but I could see stretches of games that go around that mark, particularly towards the back end of the season, as St Kilda doesn't leave Victoria after round 13. So, what's my verdict? I think you have to have this man. If he starts the season off well, 620k might be the lowest he's priced all year. However, if he were to go anywhere near his lowest projection of just 92.3, he could drop to 500k. Personally, I can't really see that happening. Like his ceiling, maybe there's a couple of games that go around that mark, but as a general, it'd be hard to fade him because it becomes a bit of a catch-22. It'd be nice if he didn't play well in the first few games and drop some cash, but then he likely moves down the ranks of players I'm targeting, right as I'm aiming to kind of get somebody in, and every chance he bounced back. So for me, you've got to start him. What's your thoughts, lads?
I've had a little bit of a play around with life without Nasiah, and this is the thing, Woody. You are a numbers man. You're a data's man like Janath, so it's really, really hard to deny that. I suppose the only thing, and this is more of a gut feel type thing, is that I think other teams will be very well aware of who this man is. Not that they weren't last year, but it felt like everything just sort of clicked and it was just perfection. Can he back it up to that degree? That's probably my question mark. Do I have him as a number one averaging defender? Yes, I absolutely do. But I'm just searching for a little bit of value at the moment, mate. But I absolutely agree. Number one defender for me in my books. Janath, yourself?
Yeah, I think personally with Naz, he's one that hasn't left my side since the start. And I know that DR, you did move him out. But I think with him, he's young. He's shown the ability to get through a tag even at a young age. But I know that you personally swapped him out for Sinclair, and it could be a mutually beneficial relationship with Naz moving into the midfield, Sinclair getting the cheap pill down back. And that's a plausible scenario. I think that could actually be a realistic scenario as well. I just think that Naz, as a beneficiary, wherever he plays, is going to score well. Now, he may not be getting the cheap pill, but in Supercoach, obviously, you get rewarded for contested possessions, impact possession in the forward half, and that's what Naz can do. So I'm confident keeping him, but at the same time, if you did think that you could balance his side out better by going down to a Sinclair, even a Jordan Clark type who doesn't have a buy at all, that may also be a way that some coaches choose to go.
Yeah, good food for thought there, guys. Perhaps it's not the only way to go, but we'll move on to the man in second with an ownership of only 10%, at least at the time of recording, is Lachie Whitfield. 2025 was the third time Whitfield cracked 110 points in his career, and my numbers suggest he'll be on the cusp of doing it again. Priced at just under 600k with an 109.06 projected average, Whitfield does present as a must-have. Much like Naz, Lockie's best projections were linear. When averaged, they suggested a ceiling as high as 116.09, whereas the weighted equivalent of that suggested a much more reserved average of 102.02. Either way, it does imply he'll make the top 6 defenders come end of the season. So, what is the verdict? While Whitfield is a player you'll want in your lineup, he is probably one that you can pick up mid-season. At $599,000, he is accurately priced, and with his low variance in projections, it's unlikely that that price is going to drastically change. Should he only manage his lowest projection of 99, his price would reduce to about 540k, meaning you lost about 60k. However, if he were to hit his highest projection of 116.9, his additional costs would only be roughly $30,000. This means, while it is likely we'll want to pick him up, there's no major benefit in doing so now. At least that's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, personally, I think that he is definitely an option that you can start. I know that some people are a bit wary with GWS because I think they share the same buy as St Kilda. So it's probably going to be hard, the early season buy that is. So in round 4, it's probably going to be hard to start both the Naz and, well, let's say off the 4 GWS and Saints defenders, Ash, Whitfield, Sinclair, Naz, going to be hard to start 2 of them. But in case that, I know that you're talking about some averages and how you've accounted for certain factors in there. But if we took out the 16 concussion score that Whitfield had, and just look at the rest of the season, he's probably averaging close to 115. And that 115 would push him even further up the sort of defender rankings for last year. And when we think about it, he's probably D2 by a fair way as well from Jack Sinclair. So I think there is definitely some value possibly in Whitfield. The question becomes, does GWS move or change their style of play to go more direct as opposed to chip out the back that may diminish both Whitfield and Ash's options?
You touch on something there, Janath, and I know we say take out his concussion, all that sort of business, and you can't help concussion, right? He just seems to be, and this is an intangible, that sort of player that has these weird niggling little injuries, and I know owning him many, many seasons, you're almost paranoid watching him. You're excited at the same time. You go through these mixture of emotions owning someone like a Lachie Whitfield. And look, the roles there, what he's got on his side is history as well. If you compare him to someone like Lachie Ash, we saw that real breakout year last year. But you've said it before, Woody, following up with that and then going to that next level again, that's pretty tough. And look, just a slight little play that I'm looking at is if you start with Nick Newman, GWS have their bye as Carlton come onto theirs the next week after. So, hey, could Newman be a little bit of a filler and then we upgrade to someone like Whitfield after that? It's long-term plans, I know, but yeah, look, like him as a pick, and I've definitely got him in the top 6 for sure.
Okay, so it seems like we're all fairly in alignment there. So we'll move on to the man in third place. Somebody we've already spoken about a couple of times. 2025 second highest defensive scorer, and St Kilda's second highest defensive scorer as well, Jack Sinclair. 2025 was the second time Jack passed 110 points in his career, and my numbers have him very close to doing it again. With an overall projection of 108.5, there are some suggesting that there might be more points available for him as his halfback counterpart departs for more midfield time. However, the flip side of that coin would argue that he might get more attention, which perhaps challenges the senior defender. But much like the previous 2, Sinclair does seem to be a must-have, but I say that with a little less confidence. His highest projection suggests a ceiling of 119.9. The reason for his lower overall, though, is the other 3 projections, which had him going just at 109.4, 106.4, and 98.2. Only 3 out of 4 of those would have Jack in the top 6 defenders, which is where my slight hesitancy comes in. But what's my verdict? While Sinclair does appear to be one you'll want in your lineup, he too is one I think you can wait to pick up. At 606k, like Whitfield, he seems to be accurately priced, and he presents many of the same issues. Should he only manage his lowest projection of 98 points, you could lose $70,000. However, if he were to hit his highest ceiling of 119.9, his additional costs would be higher than Whitfield, going to roughly 650. It's essentially the same problem, but with a higher risk to reward spread. So again, he's unlikely to be somebody we need to pick up now. There's just no major benefit in doing so. At least that's my thoughts. Janath, DR, do you think differently?
Janath, I'll give mine in a sec. What do you think, mate? Be honest about Mr. Sinclair, who's currently in my side.
I think that Sinclair will either finish as a top 3 defender or completely out of the top 6.
Oh, jeez.
And the way it comes down to me is I think Sinclair as a defender with Naz in defence is not a top 6 defender for me. I think that St Kilda, with the inclusions they have, they're going to become a serious football team. Well, let's tone it back.
No.
I don't think
that's
they're
fine.
going to become a serious football team. I think they want to become a serious football team. Let's say it that way. With Flanders, with Liam Ryan, with Tom DeConnie, they're clearly Jack Silvani. They're clearly going out to try to become a top 8 team. And in a top 8 team, I think they want Naz in the midfield. And if Naz is in the midfield, Jack Sinclair's a top 3 defender, in my opinion. But if, for whatever reason, Naz is behind the ball or the main distributor, Jack Sinclair all of a sudden becomes this player that is not going to make the top 6. And I don't know what it's going to look, and I'll probably make that decision after seeing a little bit more of training or practice match material. But if he's a boomer bust pick, in my opinion, with Sinclair.
See, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking he's just going to be a really safe pick overall. And the reason why I say that, and again, differing opinions, that's why we're here. Looking at the data, so above 50% CBAs, below, with Nas, without Nas, everything just seemed to average out just cherry ripe. There wasn't this huge variation in the data that I looked at anyway, which brought me to the conclusion that, hey, he just seems like a really safe pick. We've seen him as an All-Australian in this role before. As you mentioned, I'd be playing Nas in the midfield. If they're serious about wanting to improve, you've got to have this man in the midfield. It's an absolute given. I don't see too many other blokes really stealing much of the pie, either from Jack Sinclair. Woody, the downside there, as you mentioned, mate, there could be a little bit more attention. And just looking back to his numbers last year, it was a little bit funny. It's like he went on 2 really weak 3-week periods. So you had here from rounds 6 to 8, 70, 99, and an 83. He follows it up with a 124, 131, 143, 113, goes on a bit of a tear there. Then he has another low stretch from round 15 to 17, 65, 89, 72. But then again, they're all hundreds basically after that. So I can't really put my finger on what it was during those particular games, or not he did receive a little bit more attention, but he's better than that. And I don't think we've seen too many chunks like that before. So if you can maybe just take one of those bad games out, replace it with 100 plus, then there's a little bit more meat on bone, I think, there within itself. So yeah, it's a tough one.
One other thing to add from my end as well. So there was 8 games last year that Naz had more than 40% CBAs. In those games, Jack Sinclair scored 99, 99, 131, 106, 120, 132, 128, 135, 95 and 136. So only 2 scores below 100. And I think that's 5 scores that would be a VCC score. So 120 or above. And if he's averaging 112 for the season, I think there's a pretty positive correlation with Sinclair's scores being higher when Naz is in the midfield. And it makes sense as well as to why that is.
You'd love to pair him up. That buy, yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's a toughie, but we'll move on to the man in fourth, and we've got a bit of a surprise packet here, lads. We've got Tom McCarthy.
Tom McCarthy?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're thinking. I'm surely forgetting one, if not a couple more players. And to that I say there's less than a point between him and the rest of the players over 100. So I think it's well within the realms of possible, with a projection of 101.97 and Tom poised to move into the midfield. Yeah, I think it is possible. However, with the low of 87.9 and a high of 116.6, McCarthy does have one of the wider variants, and it's not like my model can predict the second year blues. I would have sold it, made millions if it could. So while I do think he could push towards this top 6 defenders. If you do want to win it all, you'd be very brave to start with him. So what's my verdict? McCarthy could be a good selection, but at 50k or more than some of the players in the mid 400s, it's unlikely we see many people pay more to get him. The alternative of saving some cash might appeal to some though. So if you do believe there's less than a point between him and the players in the mid 500s or beyond, then yeah, that money could simply be better used elsewhere. And should it fail, you could always pivot to one of the mid 400 players and hopefully save some money. Well, definitely save some money. Unlike everybody else beforehand though, there's little to guarantee McCarthy will actually be a top 6 defender come the end of the year. However, he does currently present as one of the better underpriced premium defensive options. At least that's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Too many question marks for me personally. And the main thing is I personally, I haven't seen him in the role. So, and I don't know what the numbers are. You guys will probably know a lot better than me. But what's the best West Coast midfield average in the last 2 to 3 years? Like, who are we thinking? The Yos, the Tim Kellys? It's not going to be anything too flash, I wouldn't imagine anyway. So what's going to make Tom McCarthy just step into the midfield and all of a sudden average well enough to be super relevant when we've talked about some of these guys coming off the halfback getting free football? I don't know what his contested game is like. I suppose the bye is a positive. He's got a nice kick on him, so his disposal is usually effective, but that's in that halfback position as well with not a heap of pressure on him. So there's probably too many question marks for me. Janath, what about you, mate? How are you? What's your gut feel on him?
Oh, it's so tough because the best case scenario is that he makes the second year leap like a Nick Dacos did. So Dacos averaged 91 in his first year and then he jumps all the way to 116. But as much as I love Tom McCarthy, I don't think he has those traits in him because with Dacos in a good side, Collingwood were a good side in 2023. They won the grand final, in fact, that year. So I think like you have that going for them. Whereas with West Coast, I don't see a world where they're not bottom 4 this year. And that means automatically the Supercoach pie is limited as such. And then McCarthy is taking a portion off that pie. And for me, I think I'd just prefer to see how it goes to start the season. Look, he might be the player that flies out, but I think someone like, personally, I prefer Colby. I may even prefer the safety of someone knowing that they've done it before in a Nick Newman more than a Tom McCarthy at this stage. But I can see why the projections have been higher because he's got a Supercoach game to him.
Yeah, all very fair points. So we'll move on to the man in 5th place with the highest ownership in the defence outside of the rookies, Connor Rozee. Averaging 105.05 in 2025, this was only the second time Rozee cracked 105 points in his career, and my numbers imply it'd be hard for him to repeat it. With an overall projection of 101.76, Rozee does still appear to be one of the likely defenders to make the top 6. Like the previously mentioned defenders, Rozee has a high projected ceiling of 115.09. However, the reason for his lower overall average is the other 3 projections had him getting just 104.5, 99.89 and 87.5, of which only 2 of those projections, the 2 over 100, would have him making the top 6 defenders. So what's my verdict? Like most pickup options, he does appear to be reasonably priced, but the reason I like decisiveness is the change in role from mid to halfback flank. In the 10 games in 2025 where Rozee had 5 rebound 50s or more, he averaged 110.4 points, but in the 11 games where he didn't get 5 rebounds, he averaged just 100.2. So as I mentioned earlier, if you only think he goes at a touch over 100 points, dropping down to McCarthy or some of the options in the mid 400s might be the wiser choice. However, should he stay in defence and go at 110 or beyond, picking him up now is probably the better choice. So this one will come down to your own opinion, but historically moving with the crowd has been the safer option. So that's why I think he could either start with him now or pick him up throughout the season. But that's just my thoughts. What do you guys think?
I think straight off the bat, we've talked about some St Kilda players and some GWS players. It's the lack of that early buy. So really nice fixture to open up the season. I think that's why lots of people also viewing him as more of a starting pick to really try to take advantage of that early run that Port have. It's an absolute dream run for Supercoach. And so worst case scenario, as you mentioned, he may spend a little bit of time in the midfield, but I think if that's worst case scenario role-wise for a player, then it's certainly not the end of the world. And I suppose continuity in the role, he would have obviously had that time last season, obviously trained there in the preseason, and I think we're better off of that. So, I'm a big fan of the pick. Janath, locked in your side, locked and loaded, mate, or have you got some slight concerns in any sort of facet?
Yeah, locked and loaded at the moment. I think he showed enough last season to suggest that in the half-pack role and in wins in particular, I don't have the numbers exactly on hand, but I know definitely in 2025 in wins he was much better than in losses. That the one concern I would say that I have with him is just with regards to Port's backline. Now, there is a lot of talk going around about Todd Marshall taking kick-ins, Kane Farrell taking the leap up. And then you've got Rosie, you've got Bergman, who's touted to go into the midfield, but I'm not fully convinced he's a 100% midfield type of guy. Where do all these pieces fit? So I just want to see in preseason, in the prackies, what the Rosie is going to be the number one distributor, you'd think, but I need to see him unequivocally be the number one distributor. That's what I want to see.
It'd be a bit of a slap in the face, wouldn't it? Like, take your captain out of the midfield, chuck him in the back line, and you're not going through him really regularly. I just can't see a world where he doesn't get used really, really often. But I've been wrong many times before, and I could be again. But yeah, captain of the club, sure, they've got to use him at every opportunity. But yeah, we'll wait and see.
That we will. So we'll move on to the man in 6. With a blast from the past, we have Rory Laird, priced at $559K with an overall projection of 101.71. Laird does appear to be correctly priced. However, I do worry about his scoring potential. With projections of 95.04, 100.46, 101.8 and 109.53, this does give Laird one of the lower ceilings amongst all the defenders in this video. Looking at his 2025 season, it's a tale of two stories as well. In the first 11 matches, he averaged 96.8, but in the final 11 matches, he got 113.9. So what's my verdict? Well, I question what Laird you're going to get. Like McCarthy, Laird could be a good selection, particularly only having 1% ownership, but with the lower projected ceiling, the year-on-year trend not looking favourably, and the potential for better and cheaper options, it seems unlikely many will select him going into the season. So I'd keep him on the watch list, but unless he starts the season off particularly well, it's likely he remains a pod. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
Few things for me just straight off the bat. Again, that tricky mid-season buy. I know they don't have the early buy, but I've just got other players prioritised ahead of Rory Laird at this stage, and his nickname is a desk, and I think that's a type of pick that he is, the desk. There's nothing sexy about a desk. It is what it is in a way, and I don't see a heap of upside to the pick. I think he's going to be a safe as houses type pick, decent floor, not the biggest ceiling we've ever seen, but he's that sort of player that I think you could lock in pretty comfortably just to get the job done week upon week. He's not going to win your games of Supercoach, but he's not going to lose your games of Supercoach either. So just a nice, safe, non-sexy type pick. That's the way that I feel about him. Janath?
Yeah, look, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I think with Laird, he was the beneficiary of Adelaide not really having a rebounding option. But I think a pure spark came at the end of last season with the emergence of Josh Worrell towards the end of the season. And I think Worrell took that step up. And it wouldn't surprise me to see actually Worrell take the Tom Stewart type leap that Stewart did at the start of his season. They're around the same age. They had similar stats leading into their breakout season. And in fact, I'm not sure what you've got Josh Worrell down in your projections, Woody, but if Worrell was to take that leap up, he could be the one that supersedes Laird in these rankings when we look later into the season. So that's where I see how it looks.
Where have you been hiding this Worrell pick? I've not heard you say Josh Roll before in my life, I don't think, mate. And all of a sudden, he's going to become the next Tom Stewart. You've been gatekeeping.
I'm not saying that he's going to be the next Tom Stewart. I'm saying that he's got Tom Stewart-like tendencies. He's 487K as well, so he's not hidden. He's out there, but if we look at the end of his end of last season, he had one score in the last 9 games. He had one score below 80. So he had 121, 116, 105, and a 127 in there. The 61 against West Coast. But in his final series as well, I don't have the numbers on hand, but I'm pretty sure it was 2 tons in both the Adelaide games. He's a player that I think will take on more rebounding responsibility. And with Laird, I'm not sure that that's going to suit him too well from a Supercoach perspective.
Perhaps you could be right. I mean, his overall projection, I have him just short of 94, but his highest projection goes all the way to 114.5. So, yeah, perhaps Worrell is one to keep an eye out for, but we'll round out the players projected to pass 100 points in the defence with an average of 101.23, the 2025 All-Australian back pocket, Jordan Clark. At 568k, Clark does appear to be well priced, but he presents as the defender with the highest risk to reward spread in this group. Clark's lowest projection of only 85 comes from the TOG normalised weighted projection, suggesting his points per minute could be improved upon, which does appear to be correct. However, Clark's overall has steadily increased from 2021 to 2024 before stalling this past year. So when we look at the regular linear projection, we see a massive jump to 125.14. What drags down his overall is the other 2 projections where he is expected to average just 98.49 and 96.3 respectively. So what's my thoughts? This feels very similar to Rosie in many regards. If you think he's going to get closer to his highest projection, it's worth starting him as he'll be close to a top 3 defender. But if you think he's only going to get his overall projected average of 101 or less, he'd still be in the top 6-ish, but only just. So it could be worth holding out for price fluctuations. If he were to get close to the 125 mark, his price would rise to 675, increasing by roughly 100k. However, if he were to only get the 85 projection, it'd drop by roughly 100k too. So Clark might be viable to start with, particularly if he goes towards the higher end of his projections, but you'd be taking on a higher risk profile, especially when you consider he costs nearly the exact same amount as Rosie, who has DPP status and a higher ownership. I also can't see his ownership rising dramatically before the season starts, although if he does start well, he might be one of the first picked up as he only does have that round 14 bye. But that's my thoughts on Jordan Clark. What do you guys think?
Damo's big on him, Janath. Damo loves this man. I know he's a Freo bloke, but my question to you is, will Judd McVee's inclusion, will that mean anything for Jordan Clark? Is this a positive type thing? Is going to free up Clark a little bit more? Is this going to be a factor whatsoever? Because I'm trying to look for Clark's upside. What's going to give him that extra 5 points to that average? And is the McVee factor, does that give you a couple of points on the bone, you reckon?
I think it could go the other way.
Go the opposite, mate.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it doesn't come across in the way that I weigh things up. I don't do full team projections, but yeah, I think there's a good chance of that. Janath, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, look, Luke Ryan's going to get his regardless because I think he's got the monopoly on the kick-ins. Jordan Clark, if Jordan Clark swapped around with Luke Ryan on kick-ins, like in terms of their percentages, Clark's a smash pick. Like, because he's that good of a defender already, getting about 30% of kick-ins. But now with McVee in the fold as well, it gets you wondering, okay, you've got ball going out of the 3 ways now. So does that help or hinder Clark, even though McVee should help free up Clark in the same way? So I want to see it first before going there. But I will say this, apart from Rosie, if I was looking for a buy-free defender premium option, I'm probably going Jordan Clark ahead of Tom McCarthy.
Yep.
And I'm talking about not the Colby types, I'm talking about the 500, 475k blokes up.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
I think there is the possibility of him getting more points, but I think he'd need to clean up his kicking a bit, maybe get those kicks out of defence, as you were mentioning, the kick-ins. But that would require a slight change from his game and a slight change from the coach. So I'm not convinced it'll happen. Okay, so we'll move on to the defensive conclusion. My general thoughts is you have to start with at least 2 of these guys. Personally, I think Naz has to be one of them. Not everybody agrees, and that's fine. But I do think you need at least two of them. In terms of questions for you, DR and Janath, though, do you agree with the general top 6 to 7 here in terms of starters, pick-up, and watch list options?
Yeah. Probably the only player I thought was a little bit too high was McCarthy. That's probably one that stood out for me personally, but hard to argue with the rest. Yeah, I'd all have these guys right up there for averages here.
A couple of names, though, that I want to talk about, Woody, very quickly that you didn't mention. So, two names that stood out for me straight away, Lockie Ash and Josh Dacos. So, where do you have them sitting?
Okay, I'll look up Ash and Josh Dacos. Give me 1 second.
Because I'm very high on Josh Dacos. If he didn't have the bye, he'd be a very standout sort of poddish option, though.
As a defender, he's playing midfield, Janet?
I think if he plays defense or midfield, I think he'll be one to definitely will
Happy
be one
either
to
way.
miss
Okay, yeah.
at some point. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got Lockie Ash coming 11th, and I've got Josh Dacos all the way at 20th.
20th?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have.
All right.
Yeah, so I have Dacos dropping down to just short of 91, and Lockie Ash's regression is to 97.1 as well. So, yeah, I think both could be reasonable options, but my model's slightly built towards the lower scaling side, and it also prefers multiple years at a consistent level before it potentially looks at going higher. So, yeah, I think it's not too far off, but yeah, probably not 100% right either. So yeah, my system prefers consistency, and there doesn't get much more consistent than the number one projected midfielder in 2026, Marcus Bontempelli. With an overall projection of 121.72, Bont also comes in with the second highest projected overall for the whole competition. When you consider his lowest projection is 109.9 and his highest projection jumps all the way to 132.8, coupled with the fact that his overall would actually be a 9-point reduction from his 2025 score, it could well be argued that Bont might not fall that far. Though a slight dip may still be on the cards, as historically maintaining a 130-point average does seem to be pretty difficult, as only 2 out of the 8 players that have achieved that since 2012 have managed to repeat their efforts in Paddy Dangerfield in 2016-17 and Brodie Grundy in 2018-19. But what's my verdict? Well, a regression in average score and therefore price does seem to be on the cards for Bont. However, if he were to only go at 121, he would reduce his price by just 50k to roughly Zach Butter's price. And while some might argue that you could pick him up, for me this suggests there's little reason to hold out. While 50k is certainly attractive, at 121, Bont is slated to get still roughly 10 points more than even the 5th best mid historically. So because of the difficulty in trying to bring him up mid-season and the compounding losses weekly in season score, which I'll explain a bit more about later, I personally think you need to start him. What's your thoughts, guys?
I start this man every year when he's fit. It's actually the first year that I'm not starting him. And a lot of it is due to fixture. And in saying that, all your best laid plans to get Bont usually go out the window because you say to yourself, I might get him at 600. Rarely does he even come down to that. If you get this man at 650, snap him up because he's an absolute bargain. And it's all the things that you don't notice that add up to accumulate Supercoach points, like those contested knock-ons, for example. People think there's this magic Bont rule and he just gets given these free points, but it's all the things that aren't your kicks and your handballs. There's so many intricacies to the Supercoach scoring system, stuff that we wouldn't know if we'd hoped to know. There's secret herbs and formulas, all that sort of stuff. But Bont just seems to be the bloke that racks up the points year upon year. And regardless of who he's playing, I think they're the ones that are worried playing Bont. I don't think he's got too many concerns wherever he comes up against Bont. So it's a very, very scary proposition and the worst antipod in the game to have. So it's risky, mate. It's very risky. Janath, I know that you're not starting with Bont currently.
No.
Reasoning, my friend. Reasoning. Beforehand, sorry. You peg him as a number one average midfielder before you go on. by the season's end?
I've got him neck and neck with Sack Butters. I think Sack Butters, you get, yes, it may be the fixture, the early fixture, sort of the given that I think Butters will start work quite well. But I also think contract year, he's in a team that should really be centered around him in the midfield. With Bont, yes, he should be the number one, but now you've got Richards, you're going to have Joel Frazier going through there, you've got Matt Kennedy, you've got Adam Shaw, Tom Liberatore. There is so many midfielders there, whereas at Port Adelaide, you got Butters, Horne-Francis, Bergman, possibly. We don't even know yet. But Butters should be the mainstay in there. I'm just going to talk about, and I know, Woody, on our chat, you were very adamant in starting Bont, but I sort of rebutted that. I think I've always traded into Bont. And the reason being is in the last 5 years, no matter how well Bont does, he always starts around 700K, that sort of thing. Last year, he dropped to 629. Year before, down to 614. Year before that, 512. Year before that, 573. And the year before that, 590. All within the peak upgrade period around the round 7 to round 11 region. And the reason being is with the Bonds game style, yes, he has the spike scores, the 200s, and they're tough to stomach. But I think at 700K, I'd much rather hold off, and because it's just unsustainable. You can't score 150 every week, even if you're max scoring, even if you're Bont. You just cannot score 150 every week because you either get opposition attention, you have a down game, you're not feeling too well going into the game, you have personal circumstances. There's a whole array of sort of things, right? So I think even this year, Bond starting at 700K, if he gets to 640, 630, what that means is I've got 70 more K to play around with. And I feel like the successful teams I've built has been built around value. Getting the rookies in, letting them appreciate and pay enough for job security. And if it means going Bont down to a Noah Anderson, saving 80K, but putting 80K on a defender without job security or a rookie without job security into one that does have job security, I get the cheaper Bont, I get the rookie that makes the money, and I get a premium that should hold value, even if they don't meet the heights of Bont. That's the way that I see it, and that's the way I've structured my sides in previous years.
It's fair, but and the other thing is, like I said, it's just got to be at that ideal time though to actually get him in. Like when he gets to that 620, 630 mark, it's like all the planets need to align. You need to have the rookies to cull, the mid pricer that's ready to upgrade. And the other thing you're doing, Woody, is that I don't think there'd be a coach out there, mate. If you ask them, would you like Marcus Bontempelli in your side by the end of the season? I think 100% of coaches would say yes. So what you are doing is you're not worried about having to bring him in. You're going, right, let's just lock this man in from the start. We know he's going to be a must-have for every side. Sure, he's going to go down in price, like the Max Gorns, most like the Cherries, but I know in my head I've already got him in, and I know that I don't need to pay up. Maybe with these other upgrades, I can focus on some of those more fallen premiums that aren't must-haves, but are opportunistic type buys. So I'm not starting the man, but yeah, there's so many pros and cons to the probably more pros the more that I'm thinking about it. But I just don't know if I can pay up at this stage, mate.
Here's the early fixture as well for the Bulldogs. So you start with Brizzy, your boys. Giants, Adelaide, Essendon. Should be a soft matchup. Hawks, Geelong, Sydney. In the first 8 rounds, you play one. Let's say Sydney should be a top 8 side. You play one side, and Bont will probably beat up on Essendon. But apart from that, it's a pretty difficult schedule. It could be Freo, even Freo in the week after that as well. So it's not an easy matchup. Now, you do want him at the end of the season because he does come home with West Coast, Gold Coast, Richmond, Freo, North Carlton. And he should beat up on that. I just think that there's a better time to get him in rather than starting him. That's just my take there.
No, they're very reasonable points, and something we might touch on a little bit more in the conclusion as well, but we'll get to the second man, and there was very little between the top 3, coming in just behind Bont with 120.29, Nick Dacos. The majority of Nick's projections had him coming in the top 8 mids with 97.4, 113.97, 124.2 and 145.6. Like Naz, I don't think many would expect him to hit that 145 as an average, but I could see quite a few games going at that mark. The reason for his 97 was despite the fact Nick has been consistently very good, his TOG normalised points have remained roughly the same since his second season. But what's my verdict? Well, despite being $630,000, Dacos appears to be a player you must start with, as he seems to almost be underpriced. He has consistently sat at about 115 points for the last 3 years and shows no major signs of slowing down. If anything, due to the consistent occasional issues he's had along the way while maintaining this impressive average, one could argue that if he's going to find another scoring level, this season is as good a chance as any for him to make another jump. That is, provided he stays healthy though, and only my opinion. What's your thoughts, DR, Janath?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll sort of tag both of them together in Butters and Dacos, that is, because with Butters, you don't have the bye, you've got the friendly fixture, and so for that reason, he's a must-start. You need to have one of the alphas off those three to start off with, simply because if you don't, you're not going to have many captaincy options in your side to start the season off. I think you can go with your Dacos at the same time. With Dacos as well, now he is susceptible to tags, and he is also one that is susceptible to falling in price. And that's the bullet, that's the risky, but like there's times I've basically hid behind the couch when some of these blokes played that at that Uber level, just hoping that they drop a game. And sometimes they have one bad game, but they don't follow it up with a bad game and they become unattainable again. But when we look at that fixture for Dacos as well, so after playing St Kilda in round 0, he's got the Windhager tag in the past. Does that happen again? Now, Windhager is a fully graduated midfielder, but then you got Adelaide, GWS, Brisbane in the first 3 games of the home and away season. Freo, he got the Corey Wagner tag last year. And so you start to, at the start of the season, get these sort of things. Okay, are there games where Dacos may not score 130 every week? And the thing is, at the start of the season, if he does score 130, that's not a worst case scenario. Because even if your primo that's priced 60k cheaper scores a 115, you're still looking okay. You're looking okay. So that's how I view it. But Butters for me is a non-negotiable. He's the one that's been in there from the start, is probably not going to move unless injury happens.
I pretty much feel the same way. Yeah, I think, look, I don't have Dacos at Bont levels, but I do have him as a must-have by the end of the season. You touch on it, those 3 blokes there, I think you've got to have in your team ASAP. Yeah, as soon as possible. You feel so much more comfortable knowing that those 3 boys are locked in. I think there's a little bit of meat on the bone because we know that he was playing sore at times last year, which did affect his performance. So I think there's a little bit of value there. And we know, and we don't use the word too much. We refer to it, Sam Darcy as generational talent, but I think it's fair to say that Dacos is a generational type talent as well. Really coming into his prime. Maybe there may be a bit of a lack of support around him as Collingwood's older mids start to phase out. Remember, he did have those bigger bodies around him, particularly when he was younger. As they phase out, you may find it a little bit more difficult, but I suppose the evolution is that he's now the guy that needs to protect other people around him. So, I want him, but I'm not starting at this stage.
Yeah, fair thoughts. So we'll move on to the man we've spoken about a fair bit, despite not having spoken about him. There was very little between the top 3, but the gap did widen slightly here as Zach Butters' overall projection was just 117.52, which would be lower than his 121 average from last year. And we all know that players generally up their game in a contract year. So let's look at each projection. Looking it over, I think we can pretty confidently strike out everything below 121, so that leaves just 134 and basically the same score as he got last year. If anything, I'd say his true end-of-year score is somewhere between those 2 numbers. So what's the verdict? At 655k, Butters 2 looks like he would be a tough player to miss out on when building your side. Should he push towards the 130 mark, not only would he be matching Bont's starting price of over 700k, but you could again be losing out on over 10 points a match in that position, even when selecting another top 8 mid in the 5 to 8 range. So all in all, he's a must-have, he's a must-start. What do you guys think?
2 words, no-brainer. That's all I'll say. No-brainer.
One word for me, lock.
Read between us, beautiful.
Yeah, there's not much to say there. So we'll move on to the man in 4th place. I have the 2025 Brownlow medalist, Matt Rowell. After getting a career-high 118.1, my overall projection has him forecasted to drop to 110.29. When you consider he costs about 640k, that would indicate that he's slightly overpriced. When taking into account how regularly breakout scoring years are followed by regression, I could potentially see this happening. However, if he were to continue improving, I doubt he makes his highest projection of 132.04. But when looking at his projections, if we were to take the average of his two linear projections, I could see him making that 3.5 point improvement. So what's my verdict? While there is upside, when considering your finances, it does make it hard to pick him. If he were to hit his ceiling, he could cost up to 700k, but when comparing the downside of getting only 110 or worse, we could lose 40k or significantly more. This, coupled with the current ownership rate of just 11%, it seems like the Supercoach community generally agrees with my thoughts, which is there's better options in Nick Dacos, who costs slightly less, and Zach Butters, who costs slightly more, both of which will burn you if you don't have them, as their ownership rate is just too high. So I think you have to wait on Rowell and pick him up throughout the year. But what do you guys think?
I'll say this, and I think this covers every Gold Coast mid. It is the most awkward fixture because they've got all of their great matchups early on, but then they've got the early bye and then they've got the first bye. So it sort of makes sense in a way just to wait until they've had their second bye and then jump on them. They can cover for the rest. But in saying that, you're leaving behind that really friendly fixture and then you're coming into some much more difficult matchups. So I don't know if there's actually right timing with the Gold Coast players this year. Janath, what are your thoughts on the whole timing situation?
Yeah.
If you're keen on your Rows or your Andersons, when's the best time to jump on, after the bye or to start off with?
Oh, it's so tough because sharing the buys, they got the middle buy and then you got the mid-season first buy as well, like you were saying, right? So if we go the Real day costs after round 12, I think that's the optimal time. The scary part actually is that you've got North and Porto are also on that first buy. So you're going to probably have Sheasel, Butters, Rosie at a minimum. Well, most coaches at least. Then you got your McKercher. You've got your Cherry. You've got a lot of these, Bergman even. I think it's going to be hard. And I think like a Jordan Dawson, even though he looks great, I'm not sure he comes up where he comes up in your rankings, Woody, but a Dawson without a buy at the start is a tempting option. But I think I'd prefer a Callahan or someone else from a different buy, even with an early season buy, compared to a Dawson for that exact reason. So I think after the round 12 buy is probably the best time to get on the Gold Coast, boys.
Man, that's so tough. You could go for some sort of a crazy play like and we don't advocate sideways trading, but you just really start one of these big boys after the first 5-6 weeks, trade them out at what may be their highest optimal price for the year and jump on a fallen premium, bank 100k. It could be something crazy to look at, but yeah, I'd keep flipping between, are they an upgrade target after the bye, or just start with them, jump on early against the West Coast and those sort of sides. It's no easy solution there.
No, unfortunately not. However, perhaps this one's a little simpler to decide upon. Coming in fifth is the speedster from the Bellarine, Max Holmes. With a projected average of 108.12 and a starting price of 600k, Max appears to be correctly priced. However, the spread between predictive models does suggest a bit of risk. If he were to hit his low of 91.2, his price would reduce to about 500k. However, if he were to hit his high of about 131.2, that would see him rise to about 700k. When looking at his history, since 2021, he has averaged just over an additional 4 100-point matches per year, and on average of those 100-point matches, they've increased by 9.16 per year too, going from 101.3 to 128.8. And if that trend were to continue into 2026, he would be looking at 21 matches over 100 points, with that average sitting at 138. So what's my verdict? While I do believe improvement will continue, I think we can all acknowledge that those sort of numbers are pretty unlikely. So even though I do think starting out with him could work, due to price constraints, it's unlikely to be alongside the 3 mid-starters mentioned earlier. So should you favour him over one of them to make the pick work, it would require Holmes to at least up the amount of 100-point matches per year, if not the points as well. Essentially, if you can fit Holmes with Bont, Butters and Dacos, the risk of starting him drops to acceptable levels. So I'd be looking to pick him up throughout the year. What are your thoughts, guys?
He's one I haven't overly considered again, and it's due to the fixture and due to the buys. I think the way that he plays the game, his running game is terrific, and there's maybe an element of some potential improvement to his game. I think just natural progression as well. Spending that year in the midfield is also something we can't underrate, because experience is massive in football. And given the fact that he's actually had that year there, being able to train there fully in the preseason, I only see more positive things coming. I don't know how much upside I see in the pick. I don't think there's a heap, due to the fact that he did really have that major breakout last year. But all in all, a good pod selection, and someone I'd be much more keener on if he had a better fixture. Janath, where do you sit on Maxi?
Yeah, one that surprised me, actually, having him ahead of his teammate Baz, as well as some of the other midfielders that you haven't mentioned there. Look, I think he took a big leap last year. My concern with him is the tags as well. So if anyone from Geelong's can get tagged, it's probably going to go to him. And he probably does have a level to his game. I just think that without the defensive status as well, 600k, he's 600k flat, actually. He has too many games to me that are below standard for premium midfielder to really put me up there with the other names. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he can become a consistent 115 type guy. I know I'm sitting on the fence here. I just don't think I'm in the pro Holmes as a starting pick camp.
Well, perhaps not as simple as I thought, but this next one is fairly simple for me. Ooh. He's the one that I think is better priced and cheaper than Max Holmes. Coming in 6th, I have Caleb Serong.
Ooh.
In 2024, Serong averaged 115.7, and last year that dropped to 105.7. My overall projection says he'll score roughly the same, and that does imply he is correctly priced. Having said that, with a scoring spread of 95 to 123, this shows that his overall is being dragged to the lower side, as the majority of projections believe this regression could continue. While that is a negative, it does point to value if he can buck the trend. If he were to only get 95, his price would reduce by about 50k to 510-ish, though if he hits his ceiling of 123, he would jump by about 100k to 660 and basically be a starter. So, what's the verdict? Serong is a fine starting option in my opinion, and potentially less risky than Holmes or Rao, but like them, if you plan on using him in place of the 3 mids that we've mentioned earlier, expected to go over 120, you could be missing out on crucial points. But that's my thoughts. DR, Janath, what do you think?
What I like about him is, if I look at someone like a Jordan Dawson and someone at his price, are there going to be too many people out there that would be super surprised at the end of the year that Serong averaged more than someone like a Jordan Dawson? So I think he's that premium that has the potential to score like an uber premium. I'm not talking Bont levels, but probably that tier down from Bont, that is actually priced 30, 40, 50k below some of the blokes I think he could potentially average pretty close to. One of the main concerns for me, and I think it was Supercoach HQ that put a tweet out, I think it was something close to from the halfway point of 2024 up until the end of last year, he's averaged about 105 flat. So it's been for about the last year and a half. Remember in 2024, that start to the year that he just went absolutely ballistic, and he was one of those blokes that we really were thinking uber premium type. He seemed to slow down a little bit after that. I don't know if it was part of the Brayshaw factor. I don't really know myself, but I've cooled on him a little bit since when I made my first team, but he is definitely a premium that is high in contention for me, Woody, because a good buy as well. I just think he represents a little bit of value and can do the job for us. So, yeah, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the selection. Just quickly, Woody, have you thought about the new rules and Caleb Strong game style and how that may affect him at all, mate? Or that's probably the other thing that I'm not sure on. I've got just a couple of question marks on myself.
Yeah, look, I do think there's a chance it could hurt him, but honestly, he's a fairly little dude, and little dudes aren't just slow, at least not at AFL level. Well, there's been some, but he's not particularly. So I'm going to back him to find another element to his game and get out of packs. But yeah, Janath, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, 11 scores last year between 95 and 110. So he's really out of 24. He's hammering in that spot. So if you're looking for a midfielder that you know what you're going to get from most weeks, Sarong is probably not the worst. Again, you got the tag issues there. And that's not to say even like someone like Zach Butters, he struggled mightily against O'Shea Mullen last year. But I think the thing with Sarong is that he's such an easy tag target and he struggles to get out of tags. Sometimes he went forward last year to get out of them and he scored quite poorly as such. The other concern for me is he only had 3 scores last year, or 4, let's say 4. So he had a 131, a 149, a 142, and a 142 that you would consider scores above 125 that you would take as captaincy scores. And I don't know if it was a down year. When we were talking offline, DR, we were thinking there's nothing last year for Sarong to suggest why. Why the dip? Normally, a player has a dip because there's a role change or a new player comes into the side or there's injury and he gets interrupted or a player just had a bad year because of niggles. But for Sarong, none of this information has come out. I was looking at the data with Hayden Young in and out of the side, and Sarong scored 105, dead set 105. I think 4 out of the 7 games Young was in the side, like on the dot. So it's not necessarily a thing to do with Hayden Young either. I don't know personally, even after watching Sarong a lot, what the reason is for his decline of close to 10 points on a seasonal average.
Yeah, it's a good question, and all I can say is I hope Sarong's found the answer because I'm going to back him in. But we'll move on to the man in 7th, the Orange team's breakout midfielder from 2025, Finn Callaghan. After a 30-point jump in both TOG normalised points and his regular average, my overall projection has him sliding slightly to 107.56. Callaghan is an interesting option as he presents similar to other breakout players in 2025 as his linear projection has him continuing with massive improvement, where his weighted projections have him crashing back down to earth. When looking at his lowest projection of just 80, we could see losses up to 170k. And should he reach his highest projection of 138, not only would he reach Gary Ablett Jr. levels in 2012, but he'd also see a jump of about 140k to 740 odd. I think we can all agree that a 30-point jump after last year is pretty unlikely. That being said, I do believe Finn will be on the edge of the top 8 midfielders, but there is the chance that last year's efforts won't be improved upon. So, like many of the mids we've mentioned before, he could be a good pickup, but I don't believe Callaghan can be started in place of the 3 I've mentioned a few times now. So I'm going to have him as a pickup and maybe even just on the watch list forever, as maybe he doesn't keep it up. But what's your thoughts, guys?
Take the floor, Janath. Take the floor, mate, because I know you're a massive fan of this bloke.
I'm so big on him. I think the thing that impresses me most with Callaghan is the way that he's evolved, the way that he plays. He's not too worried about opposition attention. He's a big boy. He can get it on the ground and contest it, and he can get in transition, and he's the link guy between the Whitfield Ash and the forwards. The amount of times that I saw Callaghan on the receiving end. Now, I wish I had the exact numbers. I think he led the league in handball receives last year, which is a stat that I play a lot of sort of attention into because it means that teammates are looking for him. And even with the addition of Clary Oliver into the side this year, I think that Green and Oliver are going to complement Callaghan quite well in that they are going to be the inlets for the outlet in Callaghan. And natural progression is probably what's going to take him to the next level. And the next level for him is cracking into that top 5 and becoming an uber elite midfielder. And I've got him in at the moment, so maybe a bit biased. I know, DR, you've got him in as well. Are we looking at sort of starry lights with Callahan, or do you also think there's room for growth for him as a Supercoach mid?
I'm probably not as I'm big on him. Probably not as big as what you are. Not like lock, throw away the key type stuff. But
Oh, definitely not. Yeah.
rather than looking for upside with Callahan, the question I would flip back to is, where do you see him regressing? Where's the downside for this bloke? He's the prototype for the modern day midfielder with his size, with his pace, with his run, with his carry. We had question marks about how the new rules may affect someone like a Caleb Strong. If we look to a transition player type like Finn Callahan, I think there's going to suit him to an absolute T. So he's an early pick. We know St Kilda wanted to pay him $1 billion. I just don't see a reason that this bloke actually goes backwards. Upside is a bit of a different question, but downside, I can't see anything apart from maybe the fact, Woody, that he really did have that massive breakout season last year and went to the next level. So sometimes it is hard to maintain that. And Janath, you mentioned that he's getting better at dealing with the tag. But I'll tell you what, if I was the opposition coach and I was coming up against GWS, there's one bloke that I really want to shut down, and that's our boy Finney. Mate, don't worry about Tom Green. He's going to get under and get the ball out, but we don't want the ball getting to Finn Callahan. We don't want it in his hands. So that's just a little concern for me.
Yeah, all reasonable points. Personally, I do think he will maintain a fairly similar score from last year, but we'll move on to the man in 8th, his teammate, Tom Green. In the last 3 years, Green's gone 111, 106, and 111, and my overall projection has him going at 106.97, which would have him roughly 20k overpriced. Tom, I feel, is at a bit of an interesting junction. Usually when a younger player has a couple of years of stability in the one position, we start to see further improvement or regression. When I look at his highest and lowest projections, had no external factors change, I probably would have leaned towards his higher options, as he's only 25 and he's already bounced back from a minor scoring dip in 2024. But I'm going to have a slightly different opinion for my verdict. With the addition of an in and under centre bounce mid, perhaps Green's Supercoach scoring will suffer. Besides the outlier in his linear projection at 123, the other 3 models had him continuing to lose points this year anyway, so perhaps with the lesser the burden to shoulder, the lesser the points we have to gain, which is why I think you need to watch and wait for Green so that you could pick him up in the year, but essentially he's on the watch list. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm off the mark here or what?
I'm with you, Woody. A pick-up, if anything. I think you got 2 pretty similar players there with Clary and Tom Green. Callahan, a much different type player, different type operator, different type player. But yeah, there's nothing that really screams pick me. Tom Green, I just don't see a reason to start him at this stage. Look, if he's looking really good during the season, cool. He's got that easy mid-season buy that they just share with Richmond. So I think it's just a really obvious guy to keep on your watch list and look to jump on if you need to. Janath, are you keen on in any way to start the bloke?
Probably not. I think if I was to pick between one of them, it'd be Callahan. And just some stats to back up what I was saying on Callahan before. So Callahan started last year with a 91.4 average in the first 5 games. In the last 15 games of the season, he averaged at 118.7. A 118.7 average across the season would have had him as the 4th average in midfielder for last year, only behind Bont, Butters, and McCluggage. Like that's the level that he went to last year. He just had the first 5 games sort of mask that. The injury concerns are there. For Tom Green, they're probably less so. I just think I like the upside of Callahan a lot more than the 110 pendulum of Tom Green, if that makes any sense.
It certainly does. Now, because there's a fair few mids projected to go past 100, I'm just going to show the rest of them on screen now. I'll also add some basic numbers like the highest and lowest projected overalls and some associated prices attached. But before we go to the top 8, is there any surprises there, DR, Janath?
There are a couple. There are a couple for me, but I guess that's where the numbers don't lie. Bailey Smith at 102 and Errol Goulden at 101 is very scary. As in terms of how I view both those players compared to your projections, Oof, I'm very interested to see how it plays out, mate.
Yeah, fair. I do think my scaling is slightly off. I think from about 115 to about 105, 100 could be spread a little bit better. But yeah, I think the overall order of players isn't too far off. But DR, do you have any thoughts, mate?
One thing I love seeing my boy Norm Ashcroft sitting up there just behind Josh Dunkley. I agree. I'd have Dunkley and Ashcroft and McCluggage all ahead of Neil. Interesting to see McCluggage below those two. I know that lots of people probably have Clug as number one, averaging lines mid. But look, there's nothing that really stands out to me. I must be honest. Maybe Goulden a little bit low for some people. But yeah, nothing huge for me, mate. Yeah, I like it.
That's good to hear. So before we go over the top 8 specifically, to touch on something we've mentioned a couple of times now, I do think you need to be starting all of Bont, Butters and Dacos. This is because with the idea of points per position and just compounding interest, I think there could be a runaway group of owners. I think all three will go to 130 points, and in prior seasons that would have taken out the top mid. Also, since 2019, the best mid on average has outperformed the fifth best mid by 11.6 points per match. So should you only have one or two while others have three, with the earliest chance of getting them in, you're likely to lose at least 80 points per position. Taking all three also gives you a little bit more time to figure out who the other best mids for the years are, while your opponents are trying to get the three that you've already got. But in terms of the top 8 that we have, because we have discussed that a few times, is there any major surprises there?
Holmesy was probably the one that I didn't have as high in my ranking. So that's probably the one out of the top 8 that I didn't personally have. You can't argue with your Bonds, your Dacoses, your Butters types, your Rail after last year. No arguments from me there. Probably Holmes, and I'm not saying that I disagree with it. He's just not someone that I'd thought too much about to have that high up. And I'd probably, without any data to back it up, just in my own, probably have Baz ahead of Max Holmes. So that's probably the thing that stood out for me. Janath, how about you, mate, with the top 8?
Yeah, I'd say the exact same thing as you did. I would also have had Tom Green below some of the other players that were listed there. I just think that with Clayton Oliver in there, it might play a little bit away from Green, even though it benefits Callahan. That's the way that I see it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that looks. Maybe like a Bailey Smith type. McCluggage wasn't in there. It was probably more surprised at the names that weren't in there as opposed to the names that were in there. But that means that there are a lot of candidate names that could make it.
That there does. And with that, we'll move on to the rucks, where there's probably a few less options. But for the number one projected ruck in 2025, I have the man whose name sounds like sweet wine, Tristan Xerri. Priced at 687k, my numbers have him slightly overpriced, but if he were to hit his overall of 122.8, he'd only lose roughly 20k. But like a few others in this video, the overall pales in comparison to his linear projections, which when averaged, they had him going all the way to 144, and one of them was particularly high. That being said, I think we're all aware in the recent changes to the former centre bounce, and you two can be here for this. This is a memo to everyone. Please stop calling it a throw-up. We can call it a jump ball. Basketball figured this out ages ago. Anyway, if we were to be affected by that and go at his lowest projection of 96.6, he could lose up to 160k. But what's my verdict? With the highest percentage ownership amongst the Premier Rucks, Xerri appears to be a must-have. However, I again say that with some hesitancy, as I'd like to see the preseason matches before I can be 100% comfortable in calling him a starter. But what's your guys' thoughts?
Well, Janath, I'm sure you'll have a rough idea. What's this guy's average look like if you take out those injury-affected games where it was obvious that he was struggling? It's pretty monstrous, isn't it, mate?
Well, he averaged 127, Xerri. If you take out his first sort of 4 weeks, his first 5 weeks, where he had 89, 94, 83 with the hamstring scares, he would have averaged 135 for the rest of the season. Far and away the best player. So he's got meat on the bone, as you like to say, D. I think even he's not the most athletic type, but he's also not the least athletic type. He's never been the type of player to be 50 meters away from the play looking for the intercept mark. He's the stoppage guy. So if he can be a constant at stoppages, and some of his other fellow rucks, like your Max Gordon, like your Darcy Cameron, aren't able to make the ruck contest, and then he's going up against a second string ruckman, let alone a midfielder, that's where I think his points could come. Not from the ball up, Woody, where he's probably not going to jump over some of the other rucks. He should still be consistent in there, but I reckon around the ground, he could be feasting when some of the other rucks are a bit slower to get to those contests. Imagine him going up against a Sean Darcy type. Like Luke Jackson's not a midfielder. Now, that may also play in the favour for Luke Jackson. Sorry, just a sidetrack where Sean Darcy may not be able to make to the ruck contest. But if Jackson's travelling around the ground as a midfielder, he would. But if he's going up against a lumbering ruckman, I reckon Cherry could feast.
Can I just jump in quickly? One thing you mentioned there, Janath, and that's why I brought up that injury at the start, was that meat on the bone. And for me, with someone like a Sherry, when we're worried about some potential regression with the ruck scoring, that balances that regression for me. The fact that he's got that hidden meat on the bone that's not actually calculated into his average. So let's just say if the rucks do go down by their 10 points in average, well, with someone like a Sherry, given that injury-affected start to the year and looking at something close to a 135, then he's potentially going down to a 125, which is more than what we'd expect with that regression, if I am making sense. I just feel that that meat on the bone could balance things out a little bit.
No, I think you've got a fairly good point, but I do think it's worth just waiting to see. But we'll move on to second and possibly the most consistent man in AFL SuperCoach scoring history, Max Gawn. Coming in with a slightly higher price than Cherry at $689, with a slightly lower projection than him at $115.7. This has led to the awkward position of nearly being a pod at only 18% ownership. His projected high of $125.7 and low of $105.1 means his price at the end of the year could range anywhere from $670 to $570, which shows he is likely overpriced, but whether that's by 20k or 120k is anyone's guess. So what's the verdict? When you're a big man in your 30s and your role changes, forcing you to jump more, I can't imagine it's easy, and it makes me worry that this could be the beginning of the end for Max Gawn's dominance in Supercoach. And with all the changes surrounding his role, it's pretty easy to understand why people are holding back from the double premium ruck option that's been prevalent in so many years past. So much like the collective wisdom of that ownership number, I think it's best to pick him up in the mid-season if he is still a top 2 ruck.
I'm starting him at this stage. I think it's just similar to what you're doing with Bond. I know that I want him in my team at some stage, and I know he's going to lose a bit of cash, but that way I'm not stuffing around with the rucks. I'm not going from a mid-pricer to another dodgy guy. I tend to waste so many trades in the ruck myself, so it may be a more personal thing with my history of trading in that particular position. But I was watching a video that Jeff White put together, talking about a bit of ruckcraft and how the new rules may affect certain ruckmen. He actually thinks that it may actually be advantageous to Max Gawn because of his experience. When he does jump up, he's got this great ability to almost turn his opponent around midair to the point where they're almost facing the opposite way to the ball at times. So I just think his experience and his craft may actually allow him to even take advantage of a couple of loopholes that we're not even seeing at the moment. And hey, if he can't get to the contest, he's a type of bloke that loves to just sit down the line and he can take a couple of extra contested grabs potentially. So I just think it's not a simple one, but I think he's the bloke that I see along with Tristan Sherry as the R1 and R2 for the year. I'm just going to lock him in from the start. And I'm with you. I don't think that the rules are going to have a huge effect like some other people do. Janath, have I convinced you to start him after our chat the other night about if you don't start him, you want to trade him in and get to you or not, mate?
You have, because
the
problem for me is there's a difference between starting Gawn and starting Bond. Because if you don't start Gawn, you're going to start another primo ruckman, an English, a Jackson type that you're speculating will come close to the top two, who we believe to be Gawn and Cherry. Now, if you don't start Gawn, you're going to have to trade him in, which means you either trade him into your flex or you trade out either an English or Cherry, which is a totally different story to Bont, because you've got 6 or 5 other spots you could fill in and get Bont in. And so I think eventually, not right now, he's not in my team right now, but I want to start him. I want to start Gawn. It's just a matter of how. And it's probably going to come down to culling some fatter rookies that probably don't play round 1, but he should be there in round 1. And I see him a bit different to Gawn, and I see him a bit different to Bont and Dacos, if my thought process has made sense.
Well, that's why we have these chats. We don't agree on everything, but I do think we might agree on this one. With the number 1 projected forward, I have Harry Sheezel. With an overall projection of 113.23 and only costing 580, the Shees would actually be about 30k underpriced. The majority of predictions have Sheezel going back above his 2025 average, with only his weighted TOG bringing down his overall. So what's the verdict? I feel like there's little reason not to start him. It's unlikely many forwards average 100, let alone 110. Again, you don't want to be losing 10 points to one position at the start of the season just to go out and have to get them mid-season, especially when you know what's going to happen. But lads, maybe I think differently to you. What do you think?
Oh, you've pretty much said exactly my thoughts there. I don't think there's really much I can add to it. I just think it's a really, really obvious pick. And there is no world, Woody, is there, where this bloke is in the top couple of forwards by the end of the season. I can't see a world, mate. So just an easy lock him in and not worry about it. And you're going with the crowd here as well. He's that highly owned for a reason. There we go. Janath's got the key. There he is. He's just going to chuck it. Yes. Chuck it away, son. Yep. Beautifully played.
Throw away the key. And okay, I'll explain why. It's because even if he's going, I personally think he's going to be far and away the best forward this year. But let's say you do fade him. Who are you fading him to? There's no one that you can confidently say is going to average above 100. Flanders Petrarch is probably next in line for me, but I think they're still speculative to a degree compared to Sheezel.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. So we'll get to the next player, and I should mention there was very little between the 2nd and 3rd rated forwards, but I do need to bring up the fact that I adjusted both of these players' scores slightly. As mentioned earlier, these numbers are just meant to give you an idea of what might happen, so where I've found numbers that seem fairly significantly off, I've tried to find a number that feels closer, then I average it out. So in 2nd, I have Sam Flanders with a projected 98.7. Had nothing changed in Sam's career and he stayed at the Suns, my numbers suggested he'd only average 83.1. However, because he's moved to the Saints and looks to be playing in the guts again, I took the average of his regular and TOG normalized points from 2024 when he was a mid for the Suns and then averaged that against my original projection. So I've done a fair bit of explaining here, but what's the verdict? Personally, I think 100 is roughly the floor for Flanders this year, and should he hit that average, not only would he be a top 6 forward, his price would rise by roughly 140k. When you get the chance like this, you kind of have to take it. He's an immediate starter for me. What are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I'd go as far to say that delete the app if you don't start him. I'd be as strong as that. You just have to select this bloke. There is not a singular reason in the world, apart from if he injures himself, not to select him. It really is as simple as that. A couple of years ago, this bloke was basically the most consistent bloke in the game. I think he had the longest ton run. I forget how many rounds it was in a row, but he just did not score under 100. And I know part of it was a half back roll, but he was just in that graveyard spot up at Gold Coast, wasn't being utilised, but he's got opportunity now, and opportunity for a player of his talent. Put it together. I just see a marriage made in heaven here for a Supercoach selection. So, yeah, there's no world where I don't pick him. Keys? Yeah, where's the other keys, mate?
It's gone again.
Where are you pulling these keys from?
I will say it is the same key. So if there's any more players, don't think there's any more keys
Didn't
to
see
throw
that.
around. There's one key.
Thankfully, I don't think we have that many locks left. But in third, I had Christian Petrarca. Like Flanders, had nothing changed. Petrarca stayed at the Demons. I probably wouldn't have changed anything. However, now that he's at the Suns, I think the 94.7 that he was projected to get feels like unders. So I took the average from his score from last year and the year before he was injured, leaving him with a 98.1. But what's the verdict? Well, if Petrarca were to get a 98 average, not much is going to happen. He'd maybe go up another 10k. So while yes, there doesn't appear to be a ton of value in picking him now, the worry comes when looking at the ownership level. At 40-odd%, if he were to score at similar levels to Sheasel, he would cost an extra 80k. And you're probably missing out on 10 points, which we've gone over a few times now. So he's probably not one you have to start, but he is probably one you want by the end of the year, which means, I'm going to start him. I think you should start him. Guys, what do you think?
I'm starting him. For me, there's just three really obvious picks, which are the picks that you've just said, Sheasel, Flanders, Truck. So I'm trying not to overthink my forward line too much, to be honest, mate. And I know that Janath is very much a data and stats man, but one thing he's also big on is a player's mental well-being and, that side of the game as well. And look, we know what his last couple of years were like at Melbourne. It was pretty traumatic for him. And I just think now a new, fresh start for him, new faces, a team that's really, really in contention. Looks like he's flying in the preseason. We say this about a lot of players, but he genuinely seems happy. And I think having the extra year after that injury, he must surely have a lot more confidence in his own body now. It must, even for the bravest type person, and he tried to get back on that field, remember, but it must play mental demons with you. Surely it must after an injury like that. So, look, I think that the role will be good in between that midfield, half-forward type role. Tuchel, I think, is being phased out a little bit to the half-forward line. But I've just heard recently that they're running with Will Powell through the midfield at times, which will be interesting. I don't know if that'll stick or not, but that was news that just came out today. But, I like the pick. Nice early draw. We've talked about the awkwardness of the whole Gold Coast fixture. Start him, you don't. Either way, you want him in your side at some stage, I think.
Agreed. Totally agree.
So I think we all think the same there, but we'll move on to number 4, where I think we all will think the same again. We've got the electric small forward from Adelaide, Isaac Rankin. Giving a little respite from the headaches, Rankin just isn't a player you can start with, but he is probably one that we'll want as it gets later into the season. After getting a 96.8 in 2024 and a 99.7 in 2025, my overall projection indicates he'll have a small decline to 94.9 again. Should that be the case, he'd likely lose about 30k. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if he improved this year. With his highest projection at 115.6, if that's the case, he'd cost an extra 90k and would be competing with Sheasel, Flanders and potentially Petrarca for the number 1 forward spot. So what's my verdict? Well, I haven't mentioned the buys much in this video, but with Adelaide missing the opening round and Rankin suspended for round 1, he won't see a price rise until round 5, and that gives you plenty of time to move money around if he does seem to be a required player. However, Adelaide has their second bye in round 12, meaning you might want to hold out as that appears to be a difficult week. The most likely weeks to pick him up at this stage appear to be round 5 if his average is significantly above the 100-point pricing, or if that isn't the case, round 13 and beyond after he's dealt with the buys. So I think he's a pickup, but is there any way you think any different, guys?
Oh, look, no, obviously can't start, but definitely someone that I'm targeting to pick up. And it's tough with that buy, though. So maybe if you're looking for your last forward upgrade and all things go well, maybe after that buy, you could upgrade that. Is it round 12? I'm thinking about, isn't it? Round 12. So maybe round 13.
Same North Melbourne, Port Adelaide, Gold Coast buy, yeah.
Yeah, so give me Isaac in round 13. I'll be happy.
Yeah.
All right, so we've all pretty much agreed so far. We'll move on to the man that came 5th, the man who broke medical records by snapping both hamstrings at once, currently injured, Adam Treloar. Priced at 311k or roughly 57 points, Treloar offers value if his body could stay healthy. every single one of my projections has him in the 90s, meaning he'd gain at least 170k, making it quite understandable why so many people want him in their team. But, I mean, in terms of the verdict, it's just not going to happen. So for me, that means the question you have to ask yourself, if you're considering Treloar, is can he play enough games to make enough money for this to be a successful trade? Personally, I'll have him on the watch list to wait and see. You can make your own decisions about that. Guys, what do you think?
I'm with you. As soon as that news came through, he was out. He was out for me. And I said to myself, if there's one setback during the preseason, that's it. I'm going to stay true to that. I'm not going to get tempted. You're right, Woody. If he comes out for the first couple of weeks and just looks sublime in some sort of a role on that, you're going to be tempted. But after seeing that, it's the same thing with Draper. It's like, nah, there's a reason why we need to be ultra careful with these blokes. And I'm sort of, this sounds terrible from a Supercoach sense. I'm almost glad it's happened now. So it's like, okay, I'm out. That's the way I feel. Janath?
Yeah, no way. No way. I think there was times where, okay, sure, we might sort of, yeah, he could be in there. He was never in my official side, but I did toy with a structure to get him in. But after his setback, there's no way. Like we were talking about with Bont, like Bont, Richards, Kennedy, Fraser, Sanders, Libba. How many can you fit through there? Like it's untenable.
No, I completely understand that. But another Bulldog we might have to discuss is his teammate, big man Sam Darcy, priced at 517k. If you remove Sam's injury-affected match against the Saints last year, his average jumps by 5 to 100.6, which that alone would suggest he's 30k underpriced. But my overall projection has him sliding slightly to 93.5. However, that seems to be because of his low scores in 2023. If we just look at the linear projections, they both have him going over 110. If that were to happen, Darcy's price would rise to the 590-ish mark, and he would cement himself as a top 6 forward for 2026. So what's my verdict? Well, Darcy's highs will be high, but his lows will be equally low. In the 9 matches where he scored below 100 points in 2025, excluding the injury match, his average was just 78.4. Whereas in the 7 matches where he scored over 100 points, his average jumps to 129.1. Basically, if he can stay on the park and either raise the floor of his scoring or just get more 100s than not, Darcy will be close to a top 6 forward. But that's my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Same here, mate. Same here. I picked him up last year. Love watching this bloke play. He's not your traditional key forward type. He does chop out in the ruck as well to get more involved, which is nice when English has a bit of a rest. But yeah, definitely someone I'd love to have in my side because I love watching him. But I don't think that you necessarily need to start the man. So that's the way that I feel. Huge fan of him though. Janath, you bit the same there with the human skyscraper?
I think he's going to chuck in the odd game that it's going to be, yeah, like it's going to hurt. Best 18 should cushion that at least. I think I prefer not to start a key forward and just hope that we get a midfielder that gets DPP throughout the year, like I was going to say Chad Warner. Oh, definitely not a Chad Warner, but not even a midfielder, a ruckman. Well, you got Heaney, you got Marshall. If some of them get forward status and something was to happen, I'd much prefer to keep some slots open rather than peg in a Sam Darcy that has to be in my final side. Otherwise, I'm using a trade out to trade me. 517k is not cheap. That's the issue I have with him.
Yeah, look, I mean, he is expensive, but I mean, if he's kicking 17 goals a match like he did in the preseason, he'll pay for it in round 1. But other than that, I want to ask you a few questions about the forward line. Obviously, we don't think Treloar's going to be there at the end of the year. So who do you think we're missing in the top 6 forwards?
Is it Thilthorpe that we put in?
I think Brian Myers is the one for me.
Fair.
Now with Brian Myers, the way that he ended last year, just talking through his stats, so he only averaged 72 leading up to round 10, but then he went 114, 90, 126, 110, 100, 67. But then the last 8 games of the season: 135, 134, 96, 99, 111, 112, 190, 112, 96, 76. So his back end of the season was immense to get up to an average of 94 from being at an average of 73 midway through the season. That's where I think he slots in as a. We'll see how the Warple and Brun affects him, but I think he should be a pretty good pick.
Yeah, good thoughts. Now, we've pretty much wrapped up here, but I should let you guys know you picked number 7 and number 8 as well. So
There
well
we go.
done there. But guys, we're on my channel. It's the away video for you at least. So if there's anybody out there that hasn't seen you, where can they find you?
Firstly, mate, thank you for having us on. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Big fan of your content, Woody. So thank you very much again, mate. But yeah, Supercoach Swordplay is obviously the YouTube channel. We've got the website, supercoachswordplay.com. Big project, exciting project at the moment is obviously our Supercoach season guide. So you can head to the website. $20 gets you the guide. Janet, the GDS guide is just an absolute cream on top with this thing, mate. But what else can you tell us, mate, about the guide?
Yeah, we got plenty of good oil going through there, DR. Absolutely immense. We got a lot of GDS content in there as well for those that are unaware. Game Day Squad is a great partnership that we have going. It's another fantasy AFL platform that's a week-to-week basis. There's a full range of new comps. Woody, are you a Game Day Squad member yet? Player yet?
Yeah, I've been on game day a couple of times. I like the card pack openings, so if you get the chance, it's not bad. Check it out.
Yes, Woody.
Yes. So we got plenty of team previews. We got a lot of different articles from different people in the community as well. So I'm sure that you guys will enjoy it a lot. Go online at supercoachswordplay.com and you can grab it. You can even use our code Swordplay for 10% off as well.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put that in the description below if you are looking for it. But that wraps it up, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been way longer than I expected it to be. But yeah, this has been a great chat. For everybody watching, my name's Woody. This is Wooden Spoon Data, the 18th best AFL YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.